Today we're going to talk about namespaces. We're going to talk about what they are, and we're going to talk about our experience with them, so you might learn how we thought about it, might learn what some tips and tricks, and maybe there are some questions that you guys have that we can answer. I have Thomas with me here and Alexander. Both of us, or all three of us, are from the engineering team in Business Central. And let's see, what is namespaces? Space, name, I don't know, what is it? Namespaces, yeah. Might be a good question to ask the audience. How many of you know namespaces? Okay, you can go now. So, okay, how many of you are then using namespaces today? Okay, a little less. Okay, so maybe there's some questions out there that needs to be answered. Let's go through the basics here. So namespaces, in our way of thinking, is a way to group objects, to make like logical groups of things that belong together, and within that have a unique name in that scope of things. That we can do today by using prefixes and all sorts of things, but having something that is more explicit helps a lot. Let's look at an example here. So everybody knows what a fiesta is, right? Anybody who doesn't know? No? Awesome. So maybe it's a car? Yeah, could be a car. Is it this car? Or is it this car? Do you know? Well, actually, it's both of them, right? So there are two companies that do fiestas. An old one and a new one, right? Okay. With this logical grouping, we can kind of containerize things and give that name Fiesta a place to belong, so we know which one of them it is. Okay, so logical grouping of related functionality, it comes with a couple of extra things that we can use. It makes it easier to discover functionality that logically belongs together. So if I'm building a car library, it's nice to have things that kind of look like cars be in the same thing, things that are Ford to be in the same place, so I can find other Fords, and so forth. When you have these namespaces in your code, you can also identify some dependencies you have, things that go outside of your namespace. We're going to look a little bit on that later, but take that as input. So, some guy, a long time ago, said the hardest things about computer science is cache invalidation. We know that, of course it's hard, and naming things. And that's why we have awesome, awesome naming in our product, right? We get these kind of errors, cannot exceed more than 30 characters. That's an annoying error. And we have like 3,800 partners in a growing partner community, and they're creating more and more objects with more and more unique names. So what's the likelihood of clashing with one of those? Well, it's going to increase, right? And we get nice names like this one, right? I know, is it account schedule? Well, most of you probably know what these means, but imagine you're a new developer coming into Business Central, and you have to figure out something about account schedules. How the heck do you know that this is account schedules? That's really hard to know. But if you had a namespace called account schedules, well, maybe that would help. Okay, we could do a lot of things to fix this. We could lift the 30 characters limit, right? Yeah, everybody likes that, yeah. It is something we're thinking about, but doing that has a huge impact on a lot of things in the system. So it's not something we take lightly. Doesn't mean we're not going to do it, but there are other ways we can make this better without changing the 30 characters, or at least not doing that first. Okay, let's look at namespaces in AL. So it's the first statement in a source file. So it looks something like this. Namespace, and then whatever name you define. Pretty simple. It covers all the objects in that file. And you might ask yourself, why is that? We have these curly braces that we use to kind of componentize things and make them like belong together. Well, we looked at this, and we could choose to use the curly braces, but we decided that that's an indentation that is completely unnecessary, and we don't need that. So, no curly braces for namespaces. It covers everything in the file, and the recommendation is to have one object per file to get that clean code and easy maintainable source files. Okay. You can nest namespaces using the dot. Pretty simple. The name in the namespaces must be CLS compliant. So what does that mean? Well, basically it means that it doesn't matter if it's uppercase, lowercase, and you cannot quote it. So you can't put spaces in it, you can't put emojis in it, you can't put weird stuff in there. Make it simple and CLS compliant. You can look up on Learn what the other details of CLS compliant is, but you'll figure it out as soon as you start trying to put in emojis or other stuff, right? Okay. You can use the same namespaces in multiple files. You can use the same namespace in multiple applications. That's your choice. Of course, it would make sense to have the same functionality in the same namespace, but then you have to think about, is it really related, or is it related to the feature in one application, or is it related to the functionality in another application? So think hard and long about this, right? Because it is a breaking change to rename it. Okay. So, using. The idea behind namespaces is that you'll put things in containers. So as soon as you put your object in a container, it has access to the objects that are in the same container. In order to bring in other objects from other containers, other namespaces, you add a using statement. The using statement will then include all the objects that are in that namespace in your dependency chain inside the scope of your current file here. So what does that mean? It just means that if you don't have access to Microsoft Sales and you add a using statement, then everything in the Microsoft Sales namespace will now be accessible within this file. There's no ordering of this, so it doesn't matter if you put Microsoft first, Microsoft last, or not at all, maybe. Okay, the alternative for a using where you include all the objects in the scope for this file is explicit references here. So using these, okay, then that's a bit too much. There we go. Yeah, much better. Good. So you can change these, use these references by being very explicit. Okay, this doesn't work. There we go. Fully qualified namespaces. So you add the namespace in front of the object name when you have the definition in the variable declaration. And that means that you're pointing to one specific object in a specific namespace and not taking in all the objects in that namespace into your scope. So imagine you had two objects with the same name in the same namespace. You could point to, or in two different modules, you could point to a specific one. That helps a little bit. It doesn't remove the risk of name classes, but it will help minimize it. Okay. So what is a good namespace? Is this a good namespace? Yes? No? What about this one? Good namespace? Is this one good namespace? Well, it depends, right? It depends on what you're doing, who you are, and what the functionality you're providing is actually doing. So use common sense when you create these namespaces. I got a few tips for you. One is to avoid the generic top-level names. If you create a namespace that starts with sales, then you're likely to hit somebody else in here who's also going to do the same thing, right? So avoid that. Do use your company name as like a prefix or start of the namespace. I could use my own name, but there's likely more people out there called Steffen, so maybe I should prefix it with something else. I could use this. You can use your own company name, but be aware that some company names are not globally unique. So you may need to kind of quantify that a little bit. There is a recommendation on Microsoft Learn where we have a namespace guidance that says use application feature also here. So company, product, technology, feature, name, sub-namespace, and so forth. Could look something like this. Lots of inspiration to be found there on the Learn site, so go check that out. Last recommendation for me is don't use namespaces from other people. If you're taking a dependency on a product, don't use their namespace. Use your own, right? Even though you're extending an object in an ISV solution, use your own namespace, because the likelihood of that ISV introducing an object that might clash with yours is high. So use your own namespaces even though you're extending somebody else's functionality. Lots and lots of knowledge, lots of ideas. Now, Alexander, can you tell us a little bit about our thoughts on namespaces?
Okay. Let's talk about architecture of our application and how namespaces actually help us to make it better. Because our first idea, then we discussed what we are going to do with namespace implementation, was pretty straightforward. Microsoft base app everywhere. That's a brilliant, easy to implement suggestion. We can run a script, and we can do it probably in a few days. But next question was, what is the value of this if we do it this way? And we have a pretty large application with a very complex structure and functionality. We have 7,500 objects. We have about 20 application modules, which are organized as folders in base app. And we have a lot of local functionality. We have some other modules. So this is just a picture. And we have 72 first-party extensions. A long list. And we wanted to namespace it all. Because if we didn't, then in the future, this is going to be a breaking change for you. So on a second iteration, we decided that we can use our license guide. We can use our historical knowledge about our product structure. And we can actually talk about layers. It's quite straightforward. We have general ledger in a very middle of our application. And we have currency or dimensions as a kind of primary entities which are used across the application. If you remember very old licensing guide, that was a separated granule for currency and separated, I think, for dimensions. And we have VAT and sales tax setup, which is common for all modules and the whole application. That means, looks like layer 1 should be bank, currency, dimensions, general ledger, and VAT sales tax. So what about next layer? On top of financial management, we have inventory. We have sales, purchases, payables, receivables, and we have a lot of additional, let's say, item-related functionality for tracking, reservation, warehousing, or transfer. That looks like layer number 2. And of course, layer number 2 can use a general ledger to post cost of operations or sales and purchase documents. And then we currently have a lot of additional modules on top of that, like service or cost accounting or manufacturing, for example. And it looks like this is going to be our layer 3. This is not kind of logical or physical layer. That's, let's say, on a first draft, it's a level of complexity. And actually, if you have a very big extension, I would really recommend you to think about how you would like to use namespaces. I mean, what kind of dimension is most important for you when you implement namespaces? Because you can implement it, for example, for table, it will be Microsoft cash flow tables. For pages, it can be Microsoft cash flow pages, like we do for extensions right now. But for base app, we really would like to have a good, like a structural view on our functionality and on our design, how it's organized. And we know we have a lot of legacy code and a lot of legacy design patterns, which are still in our apps, which provide like a cross dependencies between modules. And we would like to do something with this. So we also introduced key principles, how we can do namespacing and actually reorganization of base app going forward. So first of all, I expect to have a general GL account and general journal in the same or similar namespace, because it actually belongs to same business process and to same module. At the same time, if I have objects with very little relations to other objects or kind of primary objects, for example, postcode, I expect it to be somewhere in the foundation. It shouldn't be on a very low level and reused by any other modules in our system. And then we should have object dependencies going down, not up. That means I don't expect that a general journal posting contains objects from sales or project or manufacturing areas. Currently, this is the case, but that's not right. And we also need to do something. And also we decided, it's, you know, we are all very experienced developers. We can do a lot of great refactoring, but we decided, then we do namespacing, no refactoring, because we really need to get a kind of snapshot of our actual structure and then analyze it with namespaces and then decide what's next. So finally, we end up with a lot of namespaces. So it's a finance layer. And here, actually, probably, you see it probably not from some rows. But of course, we start with general ledger. And we decided to use not more than 3 levels in namespace definition. For example, the longest one will be Microsoft.generalledger.vat.calculation, for example. That means Microsoft is default value for functional areas, and then we have not more than 3 levels. And on next level, we have inventory. We call it supply chain. Then we have projects and CRM. And finally, we have our premium functionality. What is important here? And you can see a legend on the right side of the screen that we have in green, we have primary business entities. And we expect that each module contains a primary business entity. For example, for inventory, this is item. For sales area, this is customer. And then we can analyze dependencies between and relations between primary, like a root entity, and other objects, and then come up with structure. And of course, there are many iterations how we do this kind of analysis. But finally, we identified another very important entity, or let's say like a feature in each module. We call it document. For example, for sales, this is a sales document, sales head and sales line. For job area, it will be job and job planning line. For manufacturing, it will be production order. So why we are doing this? Because we have extremely large number of case statements everywhere where we have same framework of functionality. I mean, we can actually work with abstract source document in warehousing if we provide interfaces to process specific calculations and specific data retrieval and modification for pure source documents like sales order, service order, transfer order, whatever. And I will show you a little bit later how we are doing this right now. Okay, what we can achieve with a good structure of namespaces. First of all, we have much better application structure and discovery of objects. This is just a sample for general journal. And actually for general ledger. And here we have GL account, we have journal, then we have a posting routine with some code units, and finally we have a GL entry, where we post financial entries. So we have 2 simple ways. We can use IL Explorer, and we can search by namespace, and we can easily see, for example, where we are posting a journal line, in which namespace and where it's located. And another possibility, then you use VS Code. You can just browse folder structure, and our folder structure for functional areas exactly correspond namespaces. That means it's, you see that it's a base up, finance, general ledger posting, and other posting, you see 7 code units which are responsible for this posting. So you can easily isolate particular functionality or module, and you can do it physically, you can do it logically, and then again, you can analyze dependency for this functional area. It's very easy. I simply use Visual Studio Search because, for example, I need to analyze if I use Microsoft Service objects in finance. You know, with my current knowledge, it looks really strange and should be changed. But I just search by Microsoft.service in a folder for finance, base up finance. And then on the right side of the screen, you can see that we currently have some references in a preview, posting preview, in a VAT, and also in invoice posting buffer. And it gives us information about, let's say, we can quickly decide what to do with this. We can check what is the size of the problem. And then we can plan our activities for further improvements. So, and probably most important for us, and probably most important for you too. Actually, we have a legacy monolith. Our old base app is kind of presented on the left side. It's not a real picture, it's just a kind of, you know, and it's not AI, it's just something. But usually, you know, people call it spaghetti code. I don't really like it for our beautiful code and beautiful application architecture, but that's true, we have problems. And on the right side, this is just illustration of much better structure. And if, for example, we will be able to really build application components which can be reusable, which can encapsulate particular functionality, it will give us very well-defined interfaces for your extensions, for our extensions, for your extensions. And then in the future, we can really, I think, do a lot of great stuff with this architecture, if we can achieve it. And we have to achieve it actually in non-breaking way, right? It's not easy, it's actually very difficult. But we are working on this, we are thinking on this, and actually this is what we are doing right now. This is just a visualization of our current project. We are trying to prepare for componentization of premium experience. And currently we have base up, and it includes all, I call it essential modules, like sales, purchase, inventory, finance, and service management plus manufacturing. Everything is cross-related. There are thousands of dependencies between manufacturing and service management to other modules, and actually in both directions, which is extra problem. And we also have calculated fields which belongs to manufacturing and service management for customer, for item, and we have a lot of tricky puzzles which we need to address. And we would like to reorganize and refactor our code inside of application app. That means this is not going to change anything, any references for you. We are going to will be the same. I mean, it will be just normal obsolete procedure as before. But internally, we are going to introduce much better structure, and then service management app will be independent on manufacturing app, because currently they're also cross-related, which is a surprise for me. And then our core application app will be much smaller and more efficient. So this is just like a draft of scope, what kind of objects we need to touch and refactor if we do it for service management. And actually that's not all. This is a first draft. In reality, it's more work, really more work. But you can see how many cross-references we have. And here you can also see that we have some modules, like, for example, reservation, item tracking, availability calculation, requisition, and demand calculation, order promising, a lot of things, and not only in inventory, but also in other areas, which in the end of this story should become like a source document independent. Because, for example, in reservation subsystem, in a namespace Microsoft inventory dot tracking, there are no references to service management or sales orders or something, any other source documents anymore. It's just a framework. And this is extensible framework by design, because we extend it for us internally, then we also extend it for you. Because you can subscribe to same events, and you can actually use same patterns from our code to build, to integrate additional source document into reservation system. Same is going to be possible for reservation, or for availability, and for all other inventory areas very soon, already in current release cycle. Okay. And finally, just it's very easy, of course, but just to show you how we basically come up with such kind of framework, this is just a sample about order promising client. Here we have a lot of case statements which actually list different source documents and do something in several places for those documents. And here we calculate needed quantity for sales and service. And of course, sales now belongs to document, sales document, and service belongs to service document. That means if we just track by namespaces, we know how to separate it, how to split this code, where to move new code units, which will be subscribed with event subscribers to our event here. And finally, we can come up to such kind of simple structure, which is already extendable by default. We have just a event in red on the left side, on create reservation, on calc needed quantity, and then we have subscribers which provide that information. That means this is first approach, which is, I believe, used by most of you already for a good time. We also have interfaces. We also have a very nice feature, a capability to split object with like a table, with table extensions in the same app. That means we can extract fields responsible for service management from item table, put it to table extension, and put it into service management namespace. And finally, we can extract it from base app and put it to separated app. And now a lot of theory, but I'm done. And now it's time for Thomas to show you practical work with namespaces.
All right, so let me switch over to my laptop here. All right, so all good. Let's see how it actually looks like from Visual Studio Code and our extension. So right now, I have a project here that are not using namespaces, and this might be the situation that a lot of you are in. And you might already see that you can have ambiguous references when some of you introduce the same name on a object that somebody else has done here. So here I have that this item record here exists both in the base application and my legacy app that doesn't use any namespaces. So what can I do about this? Well, in order to start using namespaces, I need to opt into it. So I'll specify this namespace on my file right here. And as we can see, all of my objects are now part of the namespace, and the fully qualified name we can see right here. And my problem with the item record here went away. All good seems so far, but there's still a lot of errors in my project. So let's handle them one by one. So Steffen talked about that we can either use using or fully qualified name. And in order to assist you in doing this, we provided a code action for doing for specifying this. So you can specify the fully qualified name, and the code action will now populate it for you. Or if you go down to the other one, we can add a using for this guy, and now we are pulling in all of the objects from this namespace, which means that I could stick to this fully qualified name right here, but it doesn't really provide me any extra value. I might as well just remove it. All well and good. We now removed one set of errors right here. But my file is not that big, but this might be a bigger and bigger, might be a much bigger project. So instead of doing that, you can, of course, fix all of the missing using statements in the document, the project, or the workspace. So if we do this for the document, you see almost all of my errors, they went away. I got a few more using statements, and seems to be in a fairly good shape right here. But there's still one error going back here, and that's the description 2 here that is missing. So what is this item table that I'm actually into, that I've referenced here? And it seems like it's just, my silly small item table right here, and it's not the one that I wanted to use. So how can I figure out what's actually available? So for that, we can use the AL Explorer. So right now, I have grouped it on type. I've typed in item, and then we can go down and we see, here we are, item table. There's both one from a base application and one from the other legacy app that I had a dependency on. And I can see my legacy one didn't specify in the namespace, but luckily the Microsoft one specified one. So now I can jump back, and I can start adding the using, or I can fully qualify the item right here. But another option is also just to retype it, and then we see the option here as well. And now, when we go into it, it will automatically add the using, and it figured out which one to pick right here. My code is now compiling, all well and good. Seeing all of these using statements up here, that can be a lot, and especially from the example that Steffen showed earlier, it can take up a lot of space. So this can be collapsed down, but again, it will show up by default. But if you go into the editor, there's this folding imports by default, and if you do that, then they will be collapsed when you just open up the file. Thanks for that feedback from you. It came from you, so thanks a lot. So now I have my app. It's compiling, and I'm all good here. So let's go back again and see. So what are the restrictions that we have currently on namespaces? Well, you can only have one object of a kind with the same name in the module. So if I want to specify the item table inside my module, I can only have one of those, no matter the namespace. The other restriction that we have is that there can only be one object of a certain kind with the same name in a namespace. So again, this goes back to stick to a namespace that fits with your company and your project, and don't try to reuse some for other solutions out there. Because as soon as you collide, you have the same issue as you have today with ambiguous references, and one have to rename. So there's no good way around this one. So a little bit of a fast question right here. Do we still need affix registration? Yes, we do. This has not gone away yet. We're still working on removing it for the top-level objects. This is a work in progress. We are not there yet. And we also have some work to do around fields where namespaces are not used yet. But let's see what the future holds. So do we now need to register all these namespaces that we are going to use? No, we really don't want to be in the business of tracking all of these namespaces. So stick to the recommendations, use your company, your products, and then there should be no need for registering all these. So we really don't want to do this. But with all these namespaces, can we now go away from IDs? Well, we still need them. So the system is heavily baked into this ID situation right here, and that is how it is for now. And then what about the 30-character limit? Well, again, there are a lot of systems built around this. We can't really move away from it today, but who knows what the future holds. We might see it there. And then, is it a breaking change? Because now the name of the object is now the fully qualified name of it, contains the namespace. And yes, it is a breaking change. So how to get around this? With the normal obsolescence methods we have today. So you can still do a rename of the namespace, but it takes a little bit of work in the obsolescence here. So these are the common questions that we have seen so far. But let's open up for the floor for the questions that you might have.
Yeah. Now it's time for those questions you want to ask. Up there, okay.
Okay.
You want to run?
Where did you? Ah.
There's a t-shirt here.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, can you hear me?
Try again.
Hi?
There we go.
Now, okay. You said that affixes were still needed for fields, also for other elements like actions, procedures, etc.
Yes, so any naming you're doing in your app source app would require an affix because then makes your name unique, right? We're specifically talking about the top level objects, pages, tables, and so forth. That's the ones we're targeting first. And we would love to open up so you don't need to do affixes on those. And then, of course, the fields would be natural next, and then controls and so forth. But for now, you still need it, at least a little bit.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right. So you go, one of you?
Yep.
I'll get that to show.
So you say that renaming namespaces is a breaking change. Suppose you want to start using them. Is that allowed?
Yes.
How can you start it?
You should be able to just specify the namespace on your object, and then you opt into it.
Yes,
But
so introducing it is not a breaking change.
Correct.
Right? That's the
So
whole
it's
point.
only renaming, changing it. That's the breaking change.
So from nothing to a namespace, that's allowed?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Have one down here.
So we've seen that sometimes this using block can be very long, and we have two options. We can fully qualify, or we can do this using statement.
Yep.
Are you thinking about partial qualification? Like we can do using Microsoft Sales, and then we could do a record document sales header, for example.
Yeah, yes, and star using and all these kind of tips and tricks. Yeah, good feedback, good suggestions. I would say when we see a using block, like I just showed here, maybe it's time for reflection to think about, are we using good, solid principles? Are we using good designs here? Because essentially what you're saying with that big using statement is, I'm going to take a dependency on all this stuff here. That's my code unit here. And maybe there is at least a room for reflection there to see if that's a good idea. So for now, we have not considered and are not considering adding features where you can make it easier to include more, right? I want you to be very aware of what you're including in your namespaces.
Thank you.
Perfect.
One more question down here, yeah?
Yeah.
When will it become mandatory?
Ah, good question. I wish I had his t-shirt more. So there are currently no plans of making it mandatory, but I would expect that to happen at some point. We want to lift the one name in the entire app restriction that requires that we kind of get rid of all the scenarios where you don't have a namespace. And we really don't want to invest in things like making special logic to figure out whether you have one file in there that is not using a namespace and all these things. So when we get that clarified, I would expect that we get mandatory namespaces. Yeah, absolutely.
Thomas, actually, about making it mandatory, it's a good question, and we are not going to make it. Because, for example, internally we have base app, and here we have namespaces. And we have a lot of test automation. And here we don't want to spend our valuable resources to implement it just to have it. I mean, we want to implement it on purpose. That means we currently have it in a service tests because we need to understand the structure of those tests for our refactoring effort, right? And we have a lot of other folders with some extra objects and some like demo tool, for example, and we have, you probably have the same structure, and that means you should really decide where you need namespaces and where you can easily live without namespaces. And probably it should be just a property, for example, in app.json file for your app, which actually control it. That's possible. But make it mandatory by default everywhere, that's not an option.
Not right now, at least. Right. Yeah, not right now. So that's the discussion we're having, and the question around the whole like default namespaces in app.json is also one we've gotten a lot and decided not to do right now, simply because we want to be explicit about the choices of namespaces. Yep. One more over there.
So for current apps that we have on the app source and all the object names are with affixes, if we start using namespaces, can we remove them or rename the files, or shall we leave them?
So it would be a breaking change as it is right now, but obviously we're aware of that challenge. But right now, as it is today, it would be a breaking change if you rename an object, and that doesn't matter if you're like using namespaces or not, right? The only thing that we allow is that you introduce namespaces to an object. That's the only breaking change we allow. I haven't heard the big question. Do I need namespaces?
One all the way up there.
Okay, I'm going to wait with that one. That's a cliffhanger.
Where were we? Here.
Hello.
Hello.
Can this help with extension objects, like extension tab extensions, to somehow split them up by namespaces?
No. So namespaces has no impact on the runtime at all. It is only for your pleasure to be easily find them, right? So you can find the objects that are in the same namespace, you can categorize things, you can understand what belongs together, you can make it easier for people to kind of learn about your features if they need to, but it has no impact on the runtime at all.
So no impact on extension
No.
objects? Yeah.
No. Just as Alexander showed here, or talked about here, is you could take out a field from one table and put it in a different namespace in a table extension, and that makes it easier to understand that this specific field belongs in this functional area rather than the other functional area. So it's just for your convenience, so to speak. Yeah. Was there one more before we do the cliffhanger? No? Okay. So, there was one. Saved by the bell, right?
I'm going to come from the back here.
Okay, the last thing you said, so if we extend a table, in that extension we have another namespace. So when we are using that table, for instance, we're extending the customer table, we have to provide both namespaces, one for the customer and one for the extension field, if we want those fields as well, if I understood you correctly.
Yeah, so you need to specify the namespace for the original table where it comes from. I'm not sure you need to do it on the field.
Not yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, it sounded like it, but good clarification.
Yeah.
So that's where the namespacing on fields are missing. In the table extension, you'll get that logical grouping, so you know that this feature belongs there, but in code you can't really reference to that namespaced field yet. Does that make sense? Okay. I'll do the last one then. Do you really need namespaces? Good question, really good question. Obviously, from the comments we have mentioned today and all the things we presented, we would say, yes, you need namespaces. Obviously, you need namespaces. Go for it. Reality is, no. So, because it's not mandatory, because there are all sorts of challenges in enforcing that, you don't need namespaces right now. But if you have a large application, like we do, then it makes sense to group things together, to make it easier for people who are consuming your objects to find them, to understand them, where those things belong, understand the dependencies, consider refactoring, and all these things. So, we would say yes, but obviously if you are doing a PTE with one customization, makes no sense. Right?
Unless you hit the conflicts.
Unless you hit the conflicts, yes.
There's no other option.
Good point, yes.
But yes. Yep.
That's it for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.